Imagine this. A frantic ambulance races down the street, sirens wailing, carrying a patient whose life hangs in the balance. Suddenly, it screeches to a halt, not because of traffic, but because of a cop blocking its path. Tensions rise as the officer demands answers, his tone sharp and accusatory. Among the paramedics is Dr. Marcus, a dedicated black physician, still in his scrubs after rushing to help. But instead of focusing on the emergency, the cop singles him out, questioning his presence. When words escalate, the officer crosses a line no one sees coming. What happens next is a shocking twist that flips the situation on its head. You won't believe who's inside that ambulance and how the truth changes everything. Stay tuned to find out how this moment of prejudice takes an unexpected turn, revealing a story of resilience, justice, and the power of standing up for what's right. As the paramedics plead with the officer to let them through, Dr. Marcus tries to stay calm, his focus still on the patient inside the ambulance. Every second counts, and he knows that any delay could mean the difference between life and death. But the cop seems more interested in questioning Marcus than understanding the urgency of the situation. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The officer barks, his tone laced with doubt. Marcus explains he's a doctor, rushing to assist in a critical emergency. But the officer's skeptical glare says it all. He doesn't believe him. Meanwhile, inside the ambulance, the patient's condition is worsening. The paramedics exchange nervous glances, knowing time is running out. Marcus looks back at the vehicle, his heart racing. He has to get to his patient, but the cop's hostility is creating a wall he can't seem to break through. And the clock is ticking. The officer's voice grows louder as he insists on seeing Marcus's ID. Frustrated but determined, Marcus reaches into his pocket and calmly presents his hospital badge. The cop snatches it, barely glancing at it, before shaking his head. "This could be fake," he mutters, as if looking for a reason to escalate the situation. Meanwhile, one of the paramedics, Sarah, steps forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Officer, this isn't about us. There's a critically ill patient in that ambulance who needs immediate care. Please, just let us go." Her words seem to fall on deaf ears. Inside the ambulance, the patient's weak breaths grow shallower. Marcus's hands clench into fists, not out of anger, but out of helplessness. He knows the officer's delay could cost someone their life, but the cop's ego seems bigger than the urgency of the moment. Then the radio on the officer's shoulder crackles. A voice calls out, a message that might just change everything. The crackling voice from the radio breaks through the tension. "Officer, what's your status?" "Report immediately." The cop hesitates, glancing at Marcus and then at the ambulance. For a moment, it feels like reason might prevail, but instead, he grabs the radio and mutters a vague response, dismissing the urgency of the call. Marcus takes a deep breath, trying to suppress the frustration boiling inside him. "Officer, you don't understand," he says firmly but calmly. "That patient in there could die if we don't get to the hospital now. Let us through." The officer steps closer, his stance rigid. "You don't tell me what to do. I'll decide when this situation is clear." Suddenly, the ambulance door swings open, and one of the paramedics leans out, panic etched on their face. "We're losing them," they shout. Marcus turns to the cop, his voice filled with urgency. "Do you want their death on your hands?" The officer looks momentarily shaken, but before he can respond, another sound pierces the air. A car screeches to a halt nearby. And someone steps out, their presence commanding immediate attention. The figure stepping out of the car moves with authority, dressed in a crisp uniform. It's another officer, but higher ranking, judging by the way they carry themselves. The tension thickens as they approach, their eyes darting from the ambulance to the scene unfolding before them. "What's going on here?" they demand, their tone sharp but professional. The first officer stiffens, quickly trying to explain the situation. "This man claims he's a doctor, but I was just verifying." "Verifying?" The senior officer interrupts, their gaze locking onto the ambulance, where the patient's worsening condition is painfully clear. "You're holding up an ambulance." Marcus steps forward, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I am a doctor, and my patient is dying because of this delay." The senior officer's expression shifts as they turn to Marcus, recognizing something or someone. Their face pales. "Wait, Dr. Marcus Evans?" they ask, their voice faltering slightly. Marcus nods, confusion flickering across his face. The senior officer turns back to their colleague, now visibly angry. "Do you have any idea who you're stopping?" The first officer looks startled, but before they can respond, a loud beeping sound erupts from the ambulance. It's the monitor, a flatline. Marcus's heart sinks as he races toward the ambulance, leaving everyone stunned in his wake. Marcus pushes past the officer and jumps into the back of the ambulance, his hands shaking as he grabs the equipment. The flatline still echoes in his ears, but he doesn't stop. He knows the patient isn't gone yet. With swift precision, he begins chest compressions, his mind focused only on saving the life in front of him. The senior officer steps closer, his face hardening as he watches Marcus work. "I'm sorry," the senior officer says quietly, almost to himself. "I didn't know." Marcus doesn't respond. The seconds stretch on, each one heavier than the last. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, a weak pulse flickers back. Marcus breathes out a sigh of relief. The flatline has stopped. But just as they begin to breathe again, a voice interrupts the silence. "He wasn't supposed to make it." The words are chilling. The officer's gaze snaps toward the source, an unmarked car that had been parked in the background, its tinted windows now rolled down. From the car steps a shadowy figure, one who had been watching the entire situation unfold. It's someone Marcus recognizes from his past, a person he never thought he'd see again, let alone under these circumstances. The figure grins darkly, and Marcus feels the weight of everything shift. You saved him, but it doesn't change a thing. You've only just begun to understand what's really going on here. The audience is left with the image of that figure standing in the background, a mysterious and dangerous presence that promises a deeper, darker story waiting to unfold. Marcus's heart pounds in his chest as he watches the figure step forward, a sense of dread crawling up his spine. The man who emerges from the car is familiar, but not in a way he'd hoped. It's Daniel Clark, an old acquaintance from Marcus's past, someone he thought was long gone from his life. Daniel's smile is cold, almost mocking, as he surveys the scene. "You're still playing the hero, I see," Daniel says with a sneer, his eyes flickering briefly to the paramedics and officers around them. Marcus swallows, his mind racing as pieces of his past resurface. "Why are you here, Daniel?" Marcus asks, his voice betraying none of the shock he feels. He can't let his guard down, not now. Not when lives are still hanging in the balance. Daniel's grin widens, though there's something unsettling in it. "You never really left, did you? You've always been in the middle of things, trying to save people. But this is bigger than you, Marcus. You've unknowingly crossed into something you can't escape." Marcus's blood runs cold. He remembers bits and pieces. Daniel had always been involved in shadowy dealings, always on the edge of legality. But he had never imagined that their paths would cross again under these circumstances. Marcus takes a step back, his mind trying to process the layers of mystery around him. The senior officer, who had been standing silently in the background, steps forward. Is there something you'd like to share with us, officer? He asks, his tone suddenly serious. Daniel's eyes narrow. This has nothing to do with you. He turns back to Marcus, his voice lowering. You're about to realize that your role in all of this is far from over. But for now, let me give you a choice. Marcus feels his stomach churn as he braces himself for whatever Daniel is about to say. You can walk away, Daniel continues, and pretend you never saw me here today. Or he pauses, letting the threat hang in the air. Or you can stay and find out just how deep this goes. How much more you'll have to lose. Marcus's mind races. He knows Daniel well enough to understand that walking away is never an option, not when the man holds the keys to a part of Marcus's past that he can't ignore. With a deep breath, Marcus looks Daniel in the eye, his voice steady. I'm not walking away, Daniel. You may have been a part of my past, but this is about something much bigger now. People's lives are at stake. For a moment, it feels like the world has paused. The officer's tension is palpable, but there's no turning back now. The patient, though still in critical condition, begins to show signs of recovery. The paramedics continue their work, and the senior officer signals for backup, the calm before a storm. Daniel watches it all unfold, his expression unreadable. We'll see how long your resolve holds up, Marcus, he says, before turning away and disappearing back into his car.